Welcome to the Jeremy Mullins podcast, where we take a deep dive into different educational topics to help you optimize your life. I am Jeremy, your host. I am gathered here today. Man, that sounds like we are gathered here today by my co-host, Reno.
What's going on?
Not much. And then we have a special guest today. I kind of laughed out loud earlier. We have another, for the listeners, another physical therapist on. Tommy, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. We're excited to be here and talk shop with you guys and just talk about how performance and getting people back on court, field, whatever it is. And just great to be here.
Yeah, and Tommy came on earlier, guys, and popped up the video here on Zoom. And of course, I'm wearing my brace, and he's kind of the PT, and he's like, "Ooh, what happened?" And I said, "Well, that's the reason we're having a bunch of people come on and talk about physical therapy is because I'm in it right now. I'm recovering, so this one should be fun." But hey, before we get too far down the rabbit hole and just questions and conversations, give us a little bit of background. Who you are, what your passions are. And what you're currently doing as far as the profession goes.
Yeah, as Jeremy mentioned, physical therapist by trade. I did physical therapy school at the University of North Georgia. Prior to that, swam in college, so athletics has been part of my life too. Had physical therapy myself, as many physical therapists I'd say do before they choose the career path. After that, I got some great opportunities to get into the performance environment a little bit more. So during PT school, I had an awesome instructor that let me come along and tag along with him during his performance stuff with some of the NFL Combine prep centers in the North Atlanta area. That was my first introduction to how PT can join with performance a little bit more outside of what I had experienced in college. Following that, I got to spend a couple years at Duke, which was an awesome opportunity doing their residency and fellowship programs. Got to be introduced into what it looks like rehabbing athletes at a little bit higher level than I had in the previous experiences. But primarily there, some of the big things and touch points I got were how PT and sports science and some of our metric-based return to play can be a little bit more introduced into the higher athlete population and even beyond that too. So I worked soccer, football, and basketball, as well as a variety of other sports. My second year heavily focused in basketball, and landed me a great opportunity afterwards here at the University of Miami. My current role as a physical therapist and sports scientist for men's and women's basketball. So it was a great transition. My last year at Duke was Coach K's final year. So great season, amazing team to be around, and just great leadership and mentorship from their whole performance and rehab staff. And then got to carry that into a newly created position here at Miami.
That's awesome. So you're a neighbor, right? We're only 8 hours away.
Yeah, not too far. Florida neighbor for sure, because it's a long state.
I think it is. Is it 8 hours? It might be a little bit more than 8 hours from Tallahassee to Miami.
Yeah,
it's a hike. Yeah. In my mind, I'm like, man, I'll just jet down. No, that's pretty
far. Well, that's at the very bottom. Yeah.
Might be a good excuse for a road trip though, if Reno ever comes down, right? We come down and do part two in person.
Yeah, vacation road trip.
Vacation road trip. Second thing I'm pulling out of what you just said was I'm a little jealous, right? And I mean that in the sense of I always wanted to do sports nutrition. Like that was the reason I kind of went into nutrition. Yes, there was always there that I wanted to help people lose body fat. Growing up overweight, I always had that passion to help people lose weight, but also I wanted to do sports nutrition. You go back to 2000, I'm dating myself here, 2003, 2002, 2003, 2004, there wasn't a lot of, sports nutrition inside of sport, like you were saying. I would probably argue even your position, as a PT and sports performance back then didn't exist as much as it does today, right? That kind of whole that whole field of performance, I feel like has increased, right? And for the listeners, I want you guys to really think about this. And before Tommy come on, I viewed him and anybody that is a professional inside of sport. At the end of the day, we're performance coaches, right? And yes, we might have a different profession, whether it be dietitian, whether it be physical therapist. But at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is get our athlete, our soldier, or our client to perform at their very best. And that could look different for every single person, right? Maybe this is a 45-year-old mother who has lost 50 pounds and she wants to run her first half marathon, right? So completing that marathon within a goal time that she has is her performance versus the other end of the spectrum, like you were saying, is maybe a basketball player who is all American coming back from an injury that wants to get back to the level that they were at or even higher. Right. So, and we've got people all along that spectrum. So that's the way, I view you. And that's kind of where I want our conversation today to go is like, what are some things that you're seeing low hanging fruit people can do, from PT mobility side of things, recovery to perform optimally? And I know that's a broad question, but I'm leaving it really broad for you.
Yeah,
Cool.
absolutely. No, I couldn't agree more. I think, uh, viewing each member of the team as somewhat of an equal in the whole process is something that's really valuable to us in our setting. We, like you said, we have a lot of people that 10 years ago their position didn't exist, and adding them into the team has been really awesome. We have a sports nutrition on staff with us. We've got physical therapy, athletic training, strength and conditioning, sports science, kind of the whole shebang of different professionals that work hand in hand together. And at the end of the day, it is all about how can we collaborate, work together to get the athlete to perform their best. And each of us brings a really unique piece to that pie. I think for me in particular in the rehab setting, most of the people I see are going to be on the post-operative end. So it's people that have had surgery within our teams and that are coming back after or a longer stint of being out, a longer time loss injury. So I deal with people that are sidelined for a little bit longer than usual and definitely longer than they would like. And that's a bigger part of my role where different pieces of our team, they see things at different time points and different severities as well.
Okay. Well, we can relate that to, okay, so someone's post-op. I would also relate this to just the quote unquote regular world. Maybe someone's been very sedentary for a decade, right? They haven't been doing any exercise. They've been sitting at their job, whatever the case is, right? They're detrained, or in the case you're coming back, if someone's coming from a surgery. Doesn't necessarily mean they're detrained, especially Division I athlete. If they've had to take 6 to 8 weeks off, like, yes, they're detrained from where they were at, but they're still in pretty good shape, right?
Right.
What are, a couple of those low hanging fruit that you can get them doing, or what do you look at as far as just helping them recover and get back on the field or on the court?
Yeah, so a big part that's really important for our team is making sure that we're considering everything else around the injured body part while we're rehabbing it back. If we neglect all that other stuff while they're out, it usually takes a little bit longer to get them back in the process, and we kind of skip steps, I believe. So for us to say we have a knee injury, somebody's been out for surgery, they're coming back. As soon as we can, we're getting them back in the weight room, lifting upper body, doing upper body or bike conditioning where they can keep up cardiovascular fitness. You're still getting energy system development. You're still making sure that they're staying in shape, but we still keep the big things the big things. So they got to get their motion back from their knee. They've got to get strength back first before we start advancing to these other levels. Jumping, running, all that type of stuff too. It'd be great to get there fast, but we got to do the right things at the right time. But yes, I think, making sure that we're hitting everything and keeping them as active as possible in the process is good. Other piece to that, I think, is, these athletes have, and everyone who has, loves physical activity, sport, whatever it is, you got a big identity in that too, so athletic identity, or your identity as somebody who loves to run, or you're a runner, you're a swimmer, you're a cyclist, you're a CrossFitter, you love working out. That's a big part of who you are too. So I think, getting people back into that and not sidelined for as long as or as quickly as possible as we can, something really important to us while being safe in the rehab process too.
I'm going to relate that to what I have people walking along their wellness journey, right? So people are losing weight, and then all of a sudden there's an injury. And I always say, focus on what you can do. Because I think a lot of us, you get, oh, I'm hurt, I can't do anything, right? Versus same thing, yes, I'm a month post-op right now, but I still walk every day. I still ruck 3 days a week. I'm going to get back on the bike. I've been doing single arm stuff, been doing everything I can except for on this side, right? And I think
Right.
it's a mental thing, because they get told by their healthcare professional, just rest, right? Don't work out. And that's a very broad statement. And what the physician or the doctor or the medical provider has great intention, right? but it should be a little bit more fine tuned. Like you were saying, hey, you have an arm injury. Do not do anything on that arm, but you can still squat, lunge, walk, whatever feels comfortable, and everything else. So I love that you said that, and that you guys do that, right? Okay, let's keep this person in shape. Let's work the energy systems that we can, focusing on the stuff that we can do. Don't focus on what we can't, right? Then I'm going to
Yep.
relate back because I love this. And I talk about identity a lot with people, especially like if we're trying to quit smoking, we're trying to quit drinking, we're trying to, is don't just say I'm trying to quit drinking or I'm trying to quit smoking. Have the identity that I am no longer a smoker, right? That is one way to create change, is to think of and say out loud and create your own identity, right? And yes, same thing in this, because we'll see people in the wellness world, they'll start going where, they're working out all the time. And now they have this identity that they have to work out X, Y, and Z in order to have success. And an injury happens or something happens that throws them off because they lose that identity to a certain degree. So I think it's important, for people to have multiple identities, right? So for me, coach, father, leader, and then athlete, right? Because
Mhm.
if I put all my stock in an athlete, I definitely would not be doing very well at this point in my career, right? So I think
Right.
that's important. But how do you guys handle that? How do you help that athlete realize that, yes, while their identity is basketball player, that's not only what they are?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's, it's tough because we're in a really high level. We're in Division I athletics, and it is usually the primary identity that a lot of these kids have, and for good reason. They're elite athletes. They're really good. A couple things that I think are helpful for us in the process. One of them is um, looking at their identity as an injured athlete versus an athlete, and trying to break down that a little bit. One of the things that we'll consistently see and hear from an athlete is um, they'll call their, say, ACL side. They'll be like, "Oh, my bad leg," or my weak leg, or whatever that is. We try to like take that right away and say, "Hey, that's your surgical side. It's not a weak leg. It's not going to be a weak leg forever. It's not going to be a bad leg. It's going to be back. It's going to be strong." And giving them confidence early on about that, and really trying to break down some of the fear of re-injury, fear of going back to play from the start. The other thing I think is partnering with our sports psych colleagues too. We have some really great professionals on our team that um, they're in that process from the beginning. As soon as somebody gets hurt, they're able to, hey, just stop by, talk with them, connect with them. It may be something that they see infrequently, it might be something that they talk once, and that's all the athlete feels like they need too. So, um, but I think that's been a real helpful piece to us too. But I think not attacking, but discussing the injured athlete, how they see themselves early on is something that's really important. And then another piece that we really do is really try to keep them engaged with the team. You can get really isolated, outside of your environment when you're injured, regardless of what that is. It could be sport, could be you know getting sick and not being able to go into work. That's your community, that's your people. And so getting them back into that community is much as we can is something that we really try to do, whether that's scheduling rehabs during practice times and they're out there on the court too, they're being part of the team activity as opposed to like watching practice and then doing rehab after. Really trying to make sure they're engaged and can see themselves taking strides towards the goal.
Is there any data, or just maybe you guys do it on your end? Because I think when I went through physical therapy for my shoulder, I wish I would have more of it just being competitive. But there was no like feel good milestones, like small wins. It was kind of just like go in and knock it out. And then once you hit the insurance rate or hit the insurance amount of time I can do it, then they send you on your own. Is there things
Yeah.
you being competitive, like, hey, in 2 weeks we're gonna do a small win and you're gonna be able to um whatever it is, shoot a basketball if it's an elbow injury.
Yeah.
Is there stuff like that you guys do?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think that's such a huge, important part. We definitely have the key milestones, and I have them in my mind all the time. I've got to do this before this happens. Got to do this before this happens in the process. But yeah, like I can't agree more. Like making that a transparent thing with the person that you're working with or the athlete you're working with is really important. Um, we we have a lot of resources in our setting and a lot of cool technologies that we use. So whether it's strength measurements. Hey, we want this level of symmetry side to side before we start doing this. Once you hit this box, then we're going to able to move to this level. And even giving them a little feedback when they're doing some of these testing, watching the strength gauge, doing things like that can really get some engagement from the athlete, but then also help them see, hey, I'm making progress. And so we not only just have those little touch points of, hey, we look back, but we do a lot of video. We'll video throughout the process of different exercises, different activities. And if they're ever having a day like, man, I really just not feeling like we're making any progress, boom, whip one of those up. Hey, last week, look at what we were doing, and look what you're doing this week. Those little like small check-ins can be really helpful. And then the other pieces, we're real transparent about what the criteria is at the end of rehab and what we need to get to. And so that's discussed thoroughly, like throughout our whole process. Like, this is the end goals, and this is how we've hit those marks and where we're standing with these things. So I think those things are something we do really well. The other thing that's we're really in a great environment with is they get to see me very frequently. It's a little less of, and I'm in the team setting. My office is in the training room with them, so it's a little bit more frequent touch points, and we don't lose them at the follow-up point at the end. Like, I get to see them all the way through. Part of that's really great. Part of it's extremely stressful because you get them back, and it's not like, oh, I think they went back to play and they're doing a great job, and they haven't come into the clinic again. It's, oh, I got to watch them this weekend play and make sure that it goes well, right? So
awesome. I love what you said there about video check-ins, and I think that's a human nature thing, right? When you see small changes, we as coaches can see small changes, right? Because we might only be assessing you 2 or 3 times a week in a PT session. In a nutrition coaching session, I'm assessing them once a week, right? I can see the changes in the progress photos, but they can't, right? So I'm
right,
sure same thing on the physical therapy side. I'm like, man, I still can't fully extend this arm. But then I go back to when it was at, whatever, 60 on the extension, I'm like, oh, yeah, I can extend it a lot further now than I did 4 weeks ago, but it still
right,
feels like I can't extend it, right? I feel like I'm doing the same range of motion that I was doing 4 weeks ago, even though I can visually see that it's went from 60, I think I'm on 30 now, right? So
right,
I love that you mentioned that and you do that. So for the listener that is on any journey, right, realize that sometimes we as individuals, it's hard for us to see the change. So if you're documenting your journey via body fat test, via video, if we're speaking strength and form in running or conditioning, or in this physical therapy setting, that's something to consider. And then I think this was said earlier, and I want to go back to it. Reno asked it. Your recommendation of still being in the environment that you're in, right? So when you're injured, still try to go to your class, right? Modify as needed. Still try to go to your gym. Still try to go to church. Go to all your social settings that you've been going to, so that you keep those multiple identities going, right? Versus that isolation where, oh, I'm injured. I don't have contact in any of these social arenas that I'm in. So I love that as a take home point to the listener. So what you got, Reno? I know
yeah.
you're
Well,
one question.
I'm kind of brewing in my head. I can't think of anything right now. You just hit it. So
Guys,
yeah. With that, we'll get them back on the court right away. If it's a knee, hey, right away you can do seated shooting stuff. You can do form shooting right under the rim. We've got dribbling drills going on. We've got things that, whatever is safe within your precautions to do, we try to get that happening. And then another big piece that we do is we partner with and collaborate with their skill coaches too. So, we may have these restrictions. They can't jump yet, can't, run and do a layup. But we can get really good at your form shooting, stationary ball handling stuff. So let's start that stuff now. And then as we get back here, you're not non-contact, can't really do a whole lot of cutting, but we can get really good at shooting. And maybe that was a weak point for you before, and you're great going to the rim. You're not a great shooter. Then let's focus on these areas where we can get you better. So when you come back, you've got a skill set that you didn't even have before.
love it. The other thing you mentioned was words matter, right? And I'm paraphrasing that when I say it. Words matter. And you noted that when you talk to your clients to slash your players, hey, it's not your injured arm, right? It is your surgical arm, right? Taking away that weak negative, injured, it was your surgical arm. We're working back. I love that. And also working with sports psychologists and sports performance on that end, I think is important. So I worked with a gentleman when I first did mine. He was a colleague, said, hey, we want a free session. We did a lot of visualization and talking about it. And he was like, man, you did really good with your outlook of life and all that. I'm like, there's some things with that. I'm older now and I've had a surgery before, right? So, but I go back to my first surgery. I wrecked my mountain bike and had an AC separation, had that surgery. I'd never had a surgery before, didn't really know what to expect. I remember telling my boss, like, hey, I got surgery. I'll be back in the office tomorrow. It's like laparoscopic one day. It's good, right? Like, I didn't know anything. And I remember having that fear of wrecking my mountain bike and hurting the shoulder again, or not be able to lift heavy, fill in the blank. And I had an event that I had to do. It was a 100-mile mountain bike race in Kentucky. And the entire time we were riding, the first couple of hours, I kept thinking, what if I wreck, right? What's going to happen? Is it going to re-injure the shoulder? Sure enough, go down on like a wet rock bed, right? Straight down on the injured shoulder at the time, right? Nothing happened. And that was a point for me where it was like, okay, it's good, right? And it was good from the beginning. I just, in my mind, I still was using the term, this was my injured shoulder, instead of being like, this is a surgical repaired, it is good to go, shoulder, right? But I just remember that being a relief off my shoulders in the sense of, performance for that day, because I just took that stress, put it behind me, and I've never thought about it as a bad shoulder ever since then, right? I can go back, I've lifted just as much as I've lifted in my lifetime on that shoulder, no mobility issues. So I love the play on words. And I think that's very, very important. Last question.
We I agree with that. I think something we've done and kind of tying it to the other points is showing those checkpoints along the way helps with that too. Like you get like years that was a checkpoint for you, almost like falling on it again, right? So if there's ever a time in practice where they're in a movement like, hey, that's the exact movement you took when you tore your ACL, and you look great today. That you were able to move that movement. You did that movement 100 times before. You're doing it 100 times afterwards, and you look strong and powerful. So like pulling that from film from practice, I'll be like, hey, look what you did. You cut under the basket, juke somebody. That was exactly the same move you did when we had video of you tearing. So like putting those side by side and building confidence that way is something that's cool to do too.
I was gonna go back. I was gonna go backwards real quick on like before I guess when they're injured, before they come see you guys. Obviously, if it's an ACL or Achilles or something crazy, they pretty much go down and you guys can evaluate. But if it's maybe a significant injury, but not to the point of a tear or a rupture or anything, do you guys struggle with?
Yeah.
Since they're so competitive, because I know I would do the same thing and I do it now, of them coming to you guys if it is an injury, and then they turn in to make it worse, or is it they're pretty good about, hey doc, there's something going on?
Yeah, I think different personalities, different for sure. You have people that are don't want to sit out, don't want to miss anything at all. And then if they got to sit for a day, it's a problem for them. And they're just highly competitive. They want to get back in. You have people that are very cautious too. And I think we see both. We've got people who have a great opportunity to continue and play at the next level or continue to play professional afterwards. They sometimes are going to be like, I want to, showcase what I can do. They're also going to be, I want to be cautious to not hurt myself to the point where I can't continue to do this too. So I think we see both sides of it. We again get to see them every day for every practice, every game we're there, even skill workouts. So I think for the most part, if something happens, we've at least seen it. But you do sometimes have people that are like, I don't want to, I'm going to ride it out. I'm going to be tough through it. And that can be challenging for us, just as challenging as somebody who's overcautious. And, I don't really feel like pushing. You got to give them a little bit more encouragement and a little bit more push through the process to get back to.
Last question I got. I'll give you a little bit of time to think about it while I do some recap of what we've talked about before. But what would be 2 to 3 items be low-hanging fruit that the average person, and I understand right now you're in that sports arena, right? So you're not working with a lot of what I would consider gen pop, if we want to put that terminology on it. But I know you probably think about it, right? or you see it. So yes, you've got your athletes, but you also you see people every day. Think about 2 or 3 things that you would recommend, right? Just offhand that people could consider doing, can think about doing, or learn how to do. Okay. Now, with that being said, guys, we are an educational podcast. So, the disclaimer is everything that we instruct here is not prescribing anything to you. We encourage you to see your physical therapist, your doctor, your dietitian. And the podcast is for educational purposes only. Do you need more time? I can continue. More time to think.
Yeah. So in a certain context or just in general?
Just in general, right? Just very broad, I think we've done really good hitting on performance based. Like, so
Yeah.
if I've got listeners who are training for half marathons, maybe for the first 10K, like we've got people who train for a little bit of everything in what I call like hobbies of life, right? And
Yeah.
the injuries we talked about, the rehab that we've kind of talked about today, we can relate that from a sports person to a everyday person. But kind of pulling that back, just really thinking about lay population, right? If you walked into the local Publix, you guys got those in South Florida?
Oh yeah.
Okay, just making sure. I'm learning. If you walked into your local Publix and you could say, man, these are the top 2 or 3 things I want the average person in this facility right now to do to better their health from a mobility PT standpoint, what would it be?
I mean, I think first of all, just be active. I think, getting into the activities that you love and staying active really helpful. Everybody's going to be a little bit different. Not everybody wants to lift. Not everybody wants to run. Not everybody wants to swim. Everybody likes being a little bit active, but finding the thing you do like to do and doing it. If you're coming back from an injury, again, this is not strictly medical advice given blanketedly, but I do think get the people on your team talking. You may not have a sports scientist, physical therapist, athletic trainer, strength coach all at your disposal right there. But say you're going into rehab, but you want to get back into cycling, and you've got a cycling coach, or you're running and you've got a running team that you work with. Get those people talking in the process too. And so if you've got, you're going to rehab a couple times a week, try to get your strength or your PT talking with the people you're going to be going back to on a sporting level too. I think that stuff has been really helpful for me. And I've worked with a variety of different athletes before my time here, and learning about the sports that I wasn't familiar with was really important for me as a PT. And I think getting the opportunity with my patients to connect with the people they work with was super helpful in helping getting them back to what they wanted to get back to. I worked with a curler once. I'd never done curling in my life, but getting around what that is and the movements that they need to get into was really helpful. So if you're going through a rehab process and you do something that your PT is not familiar with, get them talking with your coach or whoever they are. And I think that's something that's really a cool opportunity to collaborate and get your own little performance team around you.
And those are not 16-ounce curls, listeners. Okay. Curling the sport.
Curling the sport on ice.
Not curling. Okay.
Not curls. Yeah.
Just want to make sure we're on point. No, I love that. And, I always like take notes as we do these when we have guests. And, some of the things I love today was, focus on what you can do, right? When there's an injury, focus on what you can do. Don't just stop training, stop working out, stop movement because there is an injury. What can we do? The identity. I think that's a big one, right? Especially from the mental side of things. If you've got your identity wrapped up in being an athlete, being a fat loss client, right? Whatever that identity is you have and you lose that, it's going to be very difficult for you to continue your journey, right? So learning how to deal with that identity and understand it's okay for us to have multiple identities, and it's okay for us to have identities that change over time, right? That is totally fine too. Words matter, especially self-talk, negative self-talk, right? In the sense of an injury specifically, like words matter in how you're talking to yourself, the words that you use, phrases that you use. And then remember, small progress, right? I think this relates really well, the physical therapy rehab world and progress on the scale, especially when people get closer to their goal weight, goal body fat, is, I would say, a lot of the same, because you just see these small changes week to week. And it's very difficult for the client to see that. And I think that is where our roles as coaches come in, to be able to point that and point those individual things out. So just some recap I'll put down. And then one question I didn't ask to you, since you were a swimmer. It's okay to breaststroke a full Ironman distance triathlon, right?
Yeah, why not? Like that was my stroke, so I'm not gonna say no. It might not be
My
fastest,
man,
but
yes.
you probably can do it. Yeah.
Oh, I do it. Trust me. That's everybody
Yeah,
teases me about that.
legally, I think it is allowed. So,
Yeah,
because
they're like, you
freestyle,
breaststroke?
you can do whatever you want. So, yeah,
Yeah. They're like, you
yep.
breaststroke? And I'm like, yeah, I can see where I'm going every stroke. It might not be the fastest.
It might
Um,
not be the fastest, but it'll get you there.
it'll
Yep.
get me there. I usually do both. I usually mix it up. So I'll do like 10 freestyle or 10 breaths freestyle, then come up and do 5 to 10 breaths breaststroke so I can see where I'm
Yeah.
going, go back down and freestyle. But everybody always teases me.
Yeah. Open water swimming is a whole nother game. Like I'm a pool swimmer first. And so it's a lot harder.
Yeah.
Open water. We did a couple of training trips where we'd go, and do some open water swimming too. And it's staying on course and staying straight is a lot easier when you've got a black line on the bottom of the pool.
Correct. And open water matters, like the type of open water.
Oh
So,
yeah.
I and I'm by no means super fast, guys. You guys, the listeners know this. Like when I do Ironman, it's for the fun of finishing. But I think my swim times have been in the 130s most of the time for 2.4. And one of those were in a lake at Ironman, Wisconsin. And one of those was I guess it's a bay in Maryland. And those open water swims were not that bad. The last one that I did was Ironman in Panama City in the ocean, and it was terrible. I probably breaststroke 90% of it because the waves were just crashing. It was bad. I think 60% of the field did not make it out of the water that day because of time cuts. Something
Yeah.
crazy. So
It's tough. Yeah.
anyway, that was my the one thing I had written down I had teased about. So.
Yeah.
I think the takeaway here is golf is the hardest sport.
Yeah.
Sure, buddy. No mention of golf all day, but I like you threw that in there.
Yeah, I had to.
Yeah.
But yeah, if there's nothing else, is there anything else you'd like to say, Tommy? Just talk about the Miami or yourself or just what your future plans are, not necessarily career wise, but just what the future looks like.
Yeah.
Wrap
No,
up.
no, it's been fun. It's just finished my second season here with Miami. So going into the third, we started to build some really cool stuff here. We have a great performance team now, kind of developed over the last couple of years and really just kind of growing, and getting better together. I think things I'm looking forward to. I just had a little daughter, so getting to spend a little more time with her this off season, definitely great. And then excited for next season, picking back up. It's a whole new game with the transfer portal and having new players. So we got a whole new team for both teams, and I'm excited to meet them, get them going, and be ready for hopefully another good year next year.
Awesome. Well, everyone listening, again, he's with University of Miami men's and women's basketball. So you can catch them pretty much every year in the postseason March Madness. But yeah, anyone's listening, we do have two presenting partners. That's Summit Rejuvenation clinics. You can use Jeremy's link in the show notes below, and you get a free consultation. So you'll get your lab done, you'll get to meet with the nurse and all that stuff, and they'll go over your blood work and see what works best for you. And then GreenUp Wealth Management. We use them for our financial portfolios, and you can get with them and use the link below also for a free consultation just to see if your financials meet their priorities, or what am I trying to say? Their thresholds, and then you guys can work together. They're great. We both use them. We both use Summit and GreenUp, and we really can't do without them. So again, thanks.
Also, guys, until next time, I hope you guys have a great day. And Tommy, once again, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Tom.